What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to LTH. My name is Abe, and in this video I want to show you guys a quick unboxing of the Radxa X4 single board computer, compare its size, show you installing Proxmox on it, as well as starting some virtual machines and some containers and some game servers, and seeing what utilization we're getting out of this machine and if it's the right choice for you. So I hope you stay tuned. I know this video is a little longer than what I normally post, but it's got a lot of great information on it, and I would like to cover more hardware reviews like this to see what it can and cannot do, and then you can decide if it will meet your needs within your home lab. So follow me along and let's get on with this video. All right, so here it is. And I just wanted to do a comparison for you, like pretty much the same size as a Raspberry Pi, or if you don't have a Raspberry Pi, most of you probably have a 2.5-inch SSD within your home lab or similar. So we can see that it's actually like not even as wide as the 2.5-inch drive, and it's even shorter. So this thing is tiny, and I mean, it's freaking sweet. So this is just a Wi-Fi antenna. This does support Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 6, as well as Bluetooth 5 and Bluetooth 5.2. And then there is a CMOS battery to remember the timing. It also does have a Raspberry Pi 2040 command module to help control this 40-pin AIO, as well as three 3.2 Type A ports, one 2.0 port, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, which is freaking sweet that we get a little board with 2.5 gig, as well as Type C power, and we get two micro HDMIs up to 4,000, as well as a 4K, right? Sorry, 4,000, as well as a 3.5mm headphone jack, and this actually supports NVMe. So I have this little 2230 Samsung NVMe that is going to be our boot drive, which is way better than a Raspberry Pi SSD wise. And these come with up to 16 gigs of RAM. This one has 16 gigs of RAM, as well as the x86 Intel N100 CPU. So this is going to be able to support like any software, as well as a 2-pin fan header. Okay, so we are going to test this out on the channel and see what can be hosted on this, right? So I want you guys to comment down below what you would like to see me try to run on this. And this one runs for about $120 with 16 gigs of RAM, plus another $30 for a 256 gig SSD. And then I'm gonna put some 2.5-inch SSDs in this via the 3.0 ports and see what it can do, right? Some people want a low voltage home lab. This is a max 25 watt home lab setup. And I just think it's a great option, especially if you're power concerned, space concerned, budget concerned in a lot of ways. 120 bucks isn't terrible. I know you can get like a micro Dell PC on eBay for 120, 150 bucks, put more RAM on it, and it would probably run stronger, but form factor, power savings, and sometimes just the tinkering aspect people enjoy. So the other thing that they did send us is the heatsink for this. Now, if you go watch Jeff Gerling's video and comment down, or go comment on his video that I'm inspired with my name from him from these X4s, and that's why I wanted to get one to try it out. And I have some other hardware coming in the mail later this week, thanks to his channel too. So this is the heatsink that they also provided. Once again, no money exchange hands. They did not sponsor this video in any way, but this is just them saying, hey, we want to support you, and they were willing to do so, which is awesome. And so then this board is going to use a heat pad, excuse me, in here, go on the bottom, and then we're going to screw this into this chassis, and this gives us a nice big heat sink for N100. I don't know if this is the second iteration. I know it was talked about having a second iteration of this to cool better and not be as loud, but I'm really not sure if that's this or not. So I'm gonna get this set up. We're going to try to install Proxmox on this in this video, host a couple virtual machines, and just see how it does. So follow me over to that part of the video. All right, guys, so now I wanna go through the BIOS with you, as well as flash Proxmox on this, and just see with this little N100 max 25 watts according to their website, what we can do and if Proxmox is going to overstress this or if it'll be fine with Proxmox on something this small. It does have a very decent heatsink. I don't know if the heat transfer is great. We're going to find that out by doing some testing. But if I switch us back over here, I'm just going to create a bootable USB with Proxmox on it using Etcher like I've shown in previous videos, which you can find on our website or in our series on how to set up a HomeLab. So I'm going to go ahead and let this flash, and then we'll come back and we'll plug it in and we'll boot to the BIOS and we'll check it out and then just see how Proxmox runs and how hot it gets and put some load on it. All right, so now that this is done, I'm just going to unplug it and plug it into our N100. This really loves to go in and out of focus, I've noticed. I'm just using a little webcam. So I'm going to plug in Proxmox. It really doesn't want to focus. I'm going to plug in a USB drive for a mouse and keyboard. And then I'm going to plug in this display cable so we can get into the BIOS and check it out. I don't know if either one of these display ports matter, but we'll plug it into that one and hope for the best. And then this is just powered 25 watts over USB-C. And so let me transition over here, and I'm going to assume it's the delete key. Yep. Okay. Wow. That booted really fast into the BIOS. I'm actually pretty impressed. That was very quick. So we're just going to look at this real quick. We have the BIOS from American Megatrends. That's pretty common. I've seen across some of these more budget boards. The build date was August of 2024. So this is about 11 month old. That N100, it looks like it is at 800 megahertz. And then, yep, we do have 16 gigs of memory, which is what I was hoping for when I asked them to send me one. So it's awesome of them to do that because I feel like we needed that headroom to be able to test this out properly. Because I know Proxmox will probably take about 2 gigs. And then we can just see USB configuration, network stack, CSM, NVMe, boot order, SanDisk, and then fast boot. So it looks like it's seen just our SanDisk at the moment. Hopefully it will see that NVMe drive here in a second when we boot. And so let's try to boot through to that and install. Okay, so we have our Proxmox GUI here for installation. We're going to click enter on that. And let's see, hopefully we don't get any errors and it can see our SSD just fine. All right, so I did want to show, I guess you can get this with 16 gigs of RAM and 128 gig eMMC. So they sent me the top of the line one that they make, which is great. We'll be able to try it out and see what it can do. You know, and then based on that, you may say I need that much or I don't need that much, but just something to consider and to be aware of, which I think is pretty sweet. You know, even if you just want a basic lower end model with even a little bit of storage, you're at like $70. You know, you can get these for as little as $60 and put a eMMC in them. So like I know if you go to this website and we do, I guess they're out of a 4 gig model right now. You can wait for them to come back in stock, but around $60 for an N100 is pretty sweet. Anyways, I logged in here and I was just looking, and we can see that we're using about 10% of the memory with nothing used. So if you do buy one of these and you want to do Proxmox, like I said, I would really just go home, like, you know, go big, go home, get a 16 gig version for 120, and then have the RAM. We're also going to try this with just Linux to see how it does, but we can see it's not even really registering that our CPU is doing anything. We've used about 3 gigs of storage on Proxmox just to give you a good idea of how this is performing. So let me go ahead and put a couple, like maybe a Minecraft server on here through Linux, and let's see what it does when we just boot a VM, or we put a VM on here with just Linux based on these numbers and see how far it goes up. And then you can kind of do the math of like, hey, this is probably what I could host on this and if you were interested in using it for that task. And then just a reminder, guys, if you go to ubuntu.com/releases, you can get to this website and then right click on it, click copy link address for the Ubuntu live server. Make sure you're not doing the desktop. Go back into your server's local ISO images, download from URL, core URL, download. You'll be able to download Ubuntu server right to your machine and get around having to download it to your computer, then uploading it back to your server. It saves you a step. It's much faster. It's definitely like the best way to do it possible. And as we can see, like this thing's moving, right? Like it is not struggling at all to download this. Yeah, our CPU usage is at 4% with Proxmox. Like we are using about 10% of the RAM still. The SSD is barely moving at 6%. So this thing seems to be chugging along with a lot of these basic tasks really well. And to me, I'm kind of thinking like, hey, if you're not a super intense HomeLabber, like if you're hosting a lot of like services for you and your family, great, but you're not really hosting too many game servers, this might be good enough for you. And this is like way smaller than a full-size mini PC or a full-size server. It's practically silent. The fan on it is pretty impressive. So we just got a 200 OK that's been downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and create a virtual machine. And then we're going to go over to console. And I want to just open this console in a new tab like this for us. So we can go to our summary page again. And I just want to see what this does, how this reacts. So we're going to click start now. Okay, so our CPU went up to about 50% there for a second. Okay, and so now that we got a GUI running and it drops all the way back down after that install, we can see. So I don't want to do anything. I just wanted to see if it'd come back down. And so now we're still showing about 1% CPU utilization. Our RAM has kicked up to 30%, 4.6. So it's pretty much doubled during this installation process. So RAM's already over 5 gigs. So like obviously I wouldn't recommend it anyways, but definitely getting a 4 gig model and running Proxmox is not the way to do it. And in a way, I probably wouldn't even recommend doing virtual machines. If you are going to do Proxmox, I'd probably say like stick to containers on this, but you never know. Okay, so it looks like we're at like 30% roughly during install. Our RAM's sitting about 5.5 to 6 gigs. So again, if you're going to want to buy one of these, this is just something to consider with Proxmox. But again, I'm in some further on videos, I'd like to show this with Portainer or just Kubernetes and Docker, or just Docker in general per se, just so we can avoid the overhead of Proxmox and get those 2 gigs back, right? So I'm going to show that in some further on videos, testing this hardware just to see how it does. Okay, so after we were done and it installed, that 30% CPU utilization went right back down to under percent. So it's kind of interesting, like Proxmox and a server running is not really CPU intensive at all. So I'm kind of thinking like, hey, if you want to run a lot of the virtual machines on here and they sit idle most of the time, besides when you or a couple family members are using it, this would be a great machine and a great option for you. In all honesty, right? Like I think a lot of people overbuild their home labs, right? Or it is fun, right? I overbuilt mine too, but it's just something to consider if you're budget constraint, you want something small, quiet, not a lot of power. Maybe you have to keep it in your bedroom and it's not an ideal place to have it. This might be a great option for you. Once again, I would avoid, if you're going to do Proxmox, stay away from those smaller sized ones and at least do a 12 or a 16 gig model. Avoid the 4 and 8s. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot this. And yep, we shoot up to 23% RAM real quick when it's doing stuff. But even these virtual machines are relatively lightweight from what I can tell. And you know, the containers will be even less than that. Okay, I'm logged in. I'm going to let this sit for just a second. Yep, and it shoots right back down to 1%, less than that, 0.25% now, just sitting idle. I'm physically touching the heatsink. Not even warm to the touch. Okay, we're at 15. I was doing a little something there in the background. And our RAM, yeah, is now sitting at idle at 3 gigs. So if you have a couple services running plus Proxmox, you're probably looking at 3 to 4 gigs and a percent or two on the CPU utilization, just to keep in mind, just to gauge your interest in this as an option within your HomeLab. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off, and let's try creating a container and see how it performs. So let's go ahead and start this and see how much more intense it is. And so our container's already started. So it's 24% for like 2 seconds and dropped right back down to below 1%. We can see our RAM usage is 1.73 gigs. So I'll have to recall the video editing and put it on the screen, but I think we were at 5 something. So a container is way, way, way lighter. Like, I'll do the math, hopefully, and put it on the screen for you guys. And once I'm logged in, we can see that this is doing nothing. So in a lot of ways, like, Proxmox is actually pretty light, and you could get away with some containers and Proxmox probably on those 8 and 12 gig versions if you're interested. And honestly, even a 4 gig version if you have a specific task, like you want a dedicated independent device for maybe a web server or something, or a storage server, and you use USB to SATA adapters to plug in external hard drives, right? But you want the x86 architecture and the ability for the light encoding or decoding or whatever that an N100 could provide to you. You could do that here. So I mean, like, okay, 1.74. Let's turn it off and see 1.74 and see how much this changes. 1.69. So this 1.7. So this uses 4/100ths of a gig. Very, very small. So very cool. Something very interesting. Let me go ahead and run a Linux GSM Minecraft server on here, and we will see what it does. Okay, and I'll probably run this just in the container out of curiosity to try to keep this as lightweight as possible, but we could go even more lightweight by doing just normal containers on Ubuntu and getting rid of Proxmox altogether. So let me go ahead and give this a shot and see how it does. Okay, so now I have it up on our left, the Radxa X board. We're at not even, okay, 1.5% roughly, 1.92 gigs of RAM. And then I'm going to load into that Minecraft server that's being hosted, and I want to see what this shoots up to. So, okay, we're getting CPU usage up to 26%. RAM just jumped to 2 gigs. All right, and I'm in. And then let's see what this can do. Okay, it's being pretty smooth. The world's generating for us. And we're up to 27, we'll say 30% RAM to be on the safe side. I do have like all the settings up high, and we're at 2.12 gigs of RAM. So to run this server and have an individual on it, it looks like our RAM, because our game server was already running from that base rate, right? So it looks like our game server only went up about a core, or about almost a half a gig, I would say, right? And now our CPU is actually down to 2%, 12% while I'm moving around, and it has to process my user data. So it looks like it jumped up there to around that 30% due to loading the world, probably for the user being me. But now it's, you know, sitting around 15%, 12%. We'll say 15 and shoot high, right? And then 2.16 gigs of RAM is steady. Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty impressive. At 16%, 15% RAM utilization, a player adds about 1/4 of a gig. So you could easily run a Minecraft server off of this with, you know, 4 or 5. I mean, more friends than that, probably. You could probably run this with 20 friends and be fine and have a single game open at a time. So that is interesting. We might try a couple other games. Like, I don't think you're going to be running any Arc servers or anything like that off this, just because Arc's very intense. But this should give you a good idea of what I'm talking about when it comes to what you can host based on those numbers. Super, super cool. Thank you guys for watching. That's going to sum up this video. I don't want it to get too long, but let me know what you think down below in the comments. Thank you for watching. This is Abe signing off with another HomeLab video.